Hello, I'm Lisa, a paediatric physiotherapist for babies and toddlers. I've seen firsthand how small, everyday habits in modern parenting can lead to big issues for our babies. In this podcast, I'm going to show you how to prevent those issues, treat them if necessary, and restore the joy to parenting. Hello, and welcome back to the Best for Baby podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Rogers-Sargent. I'm a pediatric physiotherapist, and we are busy with a lovely little mini-series where I'm giving you my favorite activities to do with your baby that will promote their development and well-being, and we are doing it in stages. And today we're looking at the age group of about 6 to 9 months. Now, as I always say at the start of the episode, remember that's a really rough guideline. So I'm going to give you a list of all the things that I want your baby to be able to do in order to start with today's episode and the activities I'm going to give you today. And if your baby's not able to do those things, even though they are 6, 7, 8, or 9 months old, then you go to the previous episode and do all those activities until your baby is at the point where we're starting today. Of course, you might say, well, shouldn't I be worried if my baby isn't doing those things? And the quick answer is no, probably not. As I always say, development is very much delayed nowadays due to all the pitfalls there are in modern parenting. So most times we don't need to worry at all. However, at the end of each episode, I'm going to give you some things to look for. And if those things describe your baby at the end age of that stage. So for example, at the end of today's episode, if your baby is 9 months old and what I describe is quite a good description of your baby, then it will be time for you to reach out and get help from your GP, your pediatrician, or your healthcare worker. So without further ado, let's have a look at where your baby should be in order to do the activities that I'm going to teach you about today. So firstly, we're going to look at our babies when they're lying on their backs, because remember, all the activities that we're discussing are in those 3 positions: on their backs, on their tummies, in supported sitting. And then we also look at rolling between their backs and their tummies. So if we look at the baby on their back, your baby at this stage should be very good at reaching for their legs, reaching for toys right up above their chest. Ideally, they'll already be grabbing their feet, but if they're not, that's okay. As long as they're reaching for their knees and a little bit beyond, grabbing their legs, that's where we want them at. We would also want them to be able to be quite comfortable when you're rolling them. So in the previous episode, I tell you how to help your baby roll from their back to their side and then onto their tummy, and also from their tummy through side lying onto their backs. And your baby should, by this stage, be quite comfortable with that. If they're not comfortable with you doing that, you need to go back and practice that, because we're going to take it one step further today. So just being comfortable, being happy. They don't actually have to be rolling on their own, just comfortable when you do it for them. When we look at the baby on their tummy, the baby should be spending a lot of time very capably resting on their elbows and pushing up, holding the head up, looking around, pushing up off their hands to straighten their elbows. Now, they don't have to get to completely straight elbows. Like in yoga, you would call that an upward dog or an upward facing dog. They don't have to be quite at that point yet, but we want them to be starting to push up. We want them to be very comfortable on their tummies when they're leaning on their elbows, reaching with one hand, maybe doing a little bit of shifting around, shuffling and moving on their tummies. So these are babies who are quite comfortable. They don't have to love spending time on their tummy, but they are comfortable and they spend a good amount of time there moving and doing things. And then when you put your baby in a sitting position, now remember from the previous episode, I said you sit on the ground yourself with your legs out in front of you, and then you open them up so your legs are in a V shape. When you hold your baby in between your legs, you shouldn't need to hold your baby under their armpits. You should be able to lower your hands sort of around the bottom of the rib area, and they should comfortably be holding their head and their upper back upright. and being able to balance that part of their body there. So you might still be giving them support lower on their trunk, but they're able to stay like that quite comfortably. And if you put your baby's hands on the ground to the side or on their legs, they should be able to lean through that hand. And they don't have to be able to balance leaning like that, but they should just be able to comfortably have the hand on the ground with a straightened elbow, either one hand to either side or both hands on their legs in front of them or on the ground in front of their legs. So that's where we want your baby to be at. If your baby fits that, even if they're not yet 6 months, then go with this. Or if your baby, as I say, is much older, it's okay. If they fit that profile, this is the place for you. So as always, we're going to just carry on with what we were doing last time and take it up a notch. So if we start having a look at our babies on their backs, it makes sense that we're going to spend very little time doing activities with our babies on their backs now, because they are ready almost to start to explore their worlds and to initiate a lot of the movement. So what we're working towards by the end of this stage is that when our babies are put down on their backs, they sort of have a fiddle, they grab their feet, they might play a little bit and then flip themselves over onto their tummy. We want them to actually be doing that all by themselves and happily doing that by the end of this stage. So what we're going to start with is to really kind of promote the rolling off the back when they're on the back. So you might start having them lying on their backs and you do the reaching and the playing, because that's always nice. You bang their feet a little bit, but you don't spend very much time doing that. What we are going to do is get them to grab their feet and then fall to the side. And you will initially do it for them, and then you will do it repetitively. So it's a bit of a sensory stimulation and a bit of an exciting movement for them. They're going whoosh, 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 side to side. But ultimately, you want them to grab their feet and flop to the side on their own. So how we're going to do that is much like we did in the previous episode, where we are encouraging them to grab their feet. You might put something bright and exciting on the feet and get them up there holding onto their feet. When they are holding their feet, you're going to tap the little feet together and build up excitement. Your baby is now at a stage where they're going to start very effectively communicating with you, and you want to promote that and build that. You also want them to learn what you're doing, what to expect, and to build the excitement of movement. So you're going to say, ready, steady, whoosh, or something along those lines, or roll, something like that. It's quick, it's sharp, but it's not too loud and excitatory. The same as you're going to be praising your baby when they get it right and saying, well done, yay, 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 yay. But you don't want to be screeching, because you're going to just get your baby, they're going to have a shock response to that loud screech, or it might elicit a startle reflex. And that will do the opposite of what we're trying to do, which is to get them to want to do it again and again and repeat what they've just done, because they get good feelings after completing whatever it is we're trying to get them to do. So we're going to build up anticipation, and we're going to make them happy once they complete it. So you have the little hands to the feet, tap the feet together, ready, steady, roll, and drop them onto their side. Now here, they may pause for a second, because it is quite a sensory stimulation. You're going to pause on the side, let them recover, before you then say, again, tapping hands and feet together, ready, steady, roll. But now you're going to take them from lying, for example, on the right side, all the way back onto their back, and then all the way onto the left side. So you first start with a half a movement, and then you repeat with a full movement, if you can understand what I mean. Now, the key here is to watch your baby's response so that they build up their communication. And also, you never want to make something overwhelming or scary for the baby. So we pause. If your baby hates this, then stop. Just do that half a movement and do one half a movement next time you're playing with your baby. But don't keep going, because they're going to hate it and then not do it. We want this to be fun. When there is fun, there is so much more learning, and there's a lot of, all the release of all the good feeling hormones and neurotransmitters. So that's what we want. In a physiotherapy session, I never continue if a baby's crying or resisting. We almost let the baby feel like they're leading. We follow their lead. And so here you're going to see, does your baby smile? Then pause and say, again, ready, steady, roll, and flop them to the other side. You may find you waiting 5 to 10 seconds on either side, but that's fine. And you may find that's all you do the first time. The next time you might go from side to side with a pause. You're never going to do it more than 5 to 10 times in one sitting anyway. Now, what you might find is your baby's not quite ready to hold onto their feet the whole time. So they let go in between, and that's fine. You might even find that they can't quite hold their feet, or you can't keep their hands on their feet and roll them. In which case, it's okay to get your baby to hold your fingers and you hold their feet. So you almost bridge the gap for them between their foot and their hand. And so they're still participating. They're doing a bit of holding. It's just that they're holding your hand and you're holding their feet. Doesn't matter, any variation of this, even if you find you kind of holding around your baby's wrists and ankles, just remember you're not squeezing them, you're not forcing it. If they're not bending their legs up nicely, tap the legs gently, lift them up and drop them, wait until they're soft and relaxed. It's that Jenga concept that I always refer to. If you have to force it to make the baby move the way you want, don't do it. Wait, tap, tap here, gently move there, and then you see baby softens up and then you go with it. It's really important to follow your baby's cues to make the physiotherapy or the activities that we're doing actually have a benefit, but also for your baby's well-being, for the cascade of the good feeling hormones and neurotransmitters. And as I say, if you're putting them into a point where they're crying and resisting, you're going to have them releasing cortisol and building up a dislike. So there's a lot of reasons why it's got to be fun and lovely, and for you as well. So do a bit. If it doesn't work, stop, do something else. Little bit, go lightly, go softly. That's pretty much all we're doing on the back at this stage. Because as I say, it's setting them up to roll, because we want these babies to, as soon as they're on their backs, think, boring. I want to move, where I can get onto my tummy and actually start to explore and move. So from here, we'll naturally now move on to rolling. And last time, I taught you how to passively roll your baby, get them from their back onto their tummy and from the tummy onto the back. Now we're going to have them participating in the rolling and actually using their muscles. Now, what's really important at this stage of development is that we start to introduce a twist. So if you can imagine the upper body and the lower body almost being separate, what we want to do is twist the upper body in one direction and the lower body in the other direction. Or in this case, we're going to keep the upper body still and twist the lower body. So we're getting a bit of a dissociation between the top half of the body and the lower half of the body. And that twisting is really important because it helps a baby to now start crossing past their midline, connecting their rights and their lefts. It also gives their movement this lovely three-dimensional quality. So they're now moving with a twist in all planes, as opposed to pretty much what they've been doing now, which is a backwards, forwards movement. Now we've got a turn and a spin involved as well. So we're going to look at this when they're in sitting, but also when they're rolling. And this is lovely because if you know anything about tummy muscles, you'll know that we have oblique muscles. And these are the ones that are diagonally laid out in your abs. So these get activated when we get that lovely twist movement. So it's a really good core strengthener, abdominal strengthener, and it's really important for later smooth movements as well as the three-dimensional movements. So with this, you're going to give a little bit less assistance, and ideally you're only going to be working on their lower body, holding their legs, and we are going to get the baby to roll and move their upper body. So they're going to use those oblique muscles to pull their shoulder and arm over to go from lying on their back onto their tummy. We are going to move the leg to start the movement. When we roll them back onto their backs, we do it as before, but we'll recap that in a moment. So when they lie on their backs, we're going to do the same as before. We show them a toy to the side, bang it, draw their attention towards it. Now, if we're going to put the toy on the left side of the baby, that means the baby's going to roll over their left arm and their left leg to get to their tummy, to get to the toy. So what we do as soon as baby is looking towards the left, we're going to bend up the right leg. You want to get that right leg bent very high, so the hip and the knee should be bent, and they should be bent to more than 90 degrees. So a really good bend there. Again, if your baby is pushing their legs straight and resisting that, don't force it. Tap, tap, tap the feet alternatively on the ground until they soften up. Tickle the foot soles is another good one, because the baby will pull their leg up and bend it in response to that. Or lift up both legs and let them drop down until they're nice and soft. And then you bend up that right leg, and you're going to hold underneath the knee. So you're kind of controlling the right leg around the knee. Then you're going to use your other hand to help by putting it under the little hip on the right side. And you're going to roll your baby over their left side by lifting and pushing on that right leg. So you're going to roll them onto the side as if you are bending the right leg over the left leg, which is on the ground still. And you may pause a little bit when they're on their side, or you just keep going gently and pressing the right knee towards the ground on the other side of the left leg. Once you get there, your baby will be kind of in between lying on their tummy and lying on their left side. So what you then do is you let go of the leg and you gently press down on their bottom, mostly on the right side, to flatten it to the ground. Now, if your baby is doing all the things I said they need to be doing in order to do these activities, they should be holding their head up the whole time. Their head's not going to be dropping down forwards. They'll be holding their head in this movement. They may still get their left arm trapped under their chest, and then just slide your hands up, hold around their chest, tip them towards the right side so the left arm can come out. Ideally, your baby will do that on their own. You may have to help a little bit by pressing out around the elbow area. Remember, we don't pull on the arm. Get that little arm out, and then they should happily be on their elbows, holding their head up. If your baby is not controlling their head, then they're not ready for this. So they should be very much participating. It may take a while until your baby understands what you want from them. So it might be quite passive initially, and you may have to help them in the beginning by taking their arm and moving it across their body. But the idea is, as soon as possible, you are only working by holding them on their legs and their bottoms and their hips, and they will bring their right arm, because that's the direction we're rolling in this example, up across their body and go onto their tummies. Now, initially, as I say, you might move the arm for them, or you could use the trick I showed you where you take a toy and touch it to the hand and get them to reach from the arm being here across their body and help with the movement, or you just show them a toy and hopefully they will reach for it at this stage. Initially, give them as much help as they need in order to succeed, in order to work out what is being wanted from them. And then you give them less and less and less help. Once they know what's going on, you can then hold them just around the lower leg, below the knee. And you'll find that's all you need to do to bend up the leg, take it across the body, press the knee down towards the floor on the other side, and they'll do the whole roll. As I say, once you get that knee onto the ground and they're in that quarter position, you do need to give a little bit of pressure on the bottom to get them flat on their tummies. And if you see at this stage your baby's flopping down, then you know they're not ready, so certainly don't do that. Roll them back. The roll back, as I said, is exactly the same as what it was in the previous stage, because we have to get those little outriggers out of the way. So we're going to roll them back over the left side onto their back. So you just straighten the left arm up underneath the head or underneath the ear, and you straighten the left leg. If it's bent and pointing outwards, just straighten it and press it towards the right leg, and then hold around the body, giving lots of support until they've rolled onto their left side, and then make one hand available to catch the head, because it may still drop back if they're going quickly. If, however, your baby's really nice and strong, what you can then do is from side lying, have a hand ready to catch the head and show them a toy and get them to follow it over their shoulder, their right shoulder that's on top, and let them drop back on their own so they're involved in the movement and participating a little bit more. Now, the one thing we want is that your baby is really eager to roll onto their tummies. So we want to reward them as soon as they get there. Even if your baby doesn't like to stay on their tummy yet, reward them. So show them the toy. They're going to roll towards it. Then make sure as soon as they're on their tummies, you give them that toy. Let them either touch it if it's a nice sensory toy, let them feel it, crunch it, chew it, put it under their mouths, reach it, and you congratulate them without giving them a loud shriek that shocks them. Let them have that toy for just a moment on the tummy, so a second or two, and then scoop them up and cuddle them so they really can then enjoy the toy, but they've already made the association with rolling over to their tummy to get that lovely hit of reward. And then make sure if you've rolled over the left side, like I've been explaining in this example, when you roll back over the left side. And then later you do it again, rolling over the right side and back over the right side. I just always, if I roll a baby over the right side onto their tummy, when I roll them back, I do it again on the right side. So it's easier to keep track that we're practicing in all directions. There's no other reason for doing it that way. From there, we're going to look at exactly what we're going to be doing on the tummy. Now, your final goal for when they are on the tummy is that they are pushing up onto all fours. They may not be doing that by the end of this stage, and that's okay. I don't need them to be doing that, but some will, and some will, of course, be crawling on all fours by the end of this stage. But it's okay if they're not. What we're doing from the start of this stage is building up towards that. So the ways that we're going to do that is continue to spend a lot of time on the elbows, pushing up actively. So lifting toys in front of them when they're on their tummy, so they have to push up. When they're there on that push-up position in that upward-facing dog, what we want is a lot of reaching for the toys, using all the tips I've told you before on how to get them to reach, one hand at a time, and also crossing over. So using the right hand to reach for something in front of the left hand and vice versa. Then we're also going to start encouraging them to go further than just shifting their weight from side to reach, to actually shifting their weight so they're kind of walking a little bit on the hands to get something. And we're going to help them with that. And you'll find that this is quite natural when they're reaching and put the hand back down, that they will naturally move along in this direction. And that's called pivoting. So we're just getting them to be a bit mobile on straight elbows, leaning through their hands when they are on their tummy. We're also going to help them here to push up onto all fours. So the best way to do this is for you to go and kneel behind your baby with your knees on either side of their legs. Because a lot of babies, when you try and get them up onto their hands and knees, their knees will slide apart. And so if you kneel with your knees on either side, you block them and stop them from kneeling apart. And then what you can do is help when they have pushed up. So you wouldn't do this unless your baby has already pushed up onto straight elbows. Once they've done that, you say, oh, okay, now there's my cue. Now I can lift from the hips at the same time, pushing the little knees forward to help get them onto all fours. But you're going to support them there. You're going to hold them because at any moment they could drop because they're not quite ready to do it on their own. So what we're doing here is giving them the sensation of pushing up. If your baby, after time, pushes up onto all fours and stays there, fabulous. Keep them there. Let them enjoy that position for a while. You can even help them to rock a little bit, but you're holding them around their body. So at any time, if their arms give, they're not going to drop their faces into the ground. We might rock them and again, use your voice to build anticipation to make it fun. So rock, oh, wow, or ready, steady. Any of these kind of sounds that really get the baby enjoying it. Rocking backwards and forwards. If your baby's not there, remember just as soon as they push up onto straight elbows on their hands, we're just helping them to feel that we're lifting their hips up so they're going onto all fours. We're just letting them enjoy that position. The other thing you can do a little bit of, knowing that they don't need to do this in order to crawl, is help them to creep and move along on their tummies, on their bellies. So belly creeping, commando crawling, any of these things you might know it by. And what we would start with that is make sure that it's a frictionless surface so they slide nicely. And of course that their face isn't down. You don't want the face sliding along the ground. They need to be looking up on their elbows, and you can help them by just giving a gentle push on the bottom. Now, to make it make sense and more motivating for them, again, like always, we show them a lovely toy very nearby. They only need to slide a tiny bit when we are starting to show them this. So you show them the toy just in front, and they must reach for it but not be able to get it. Then we say, let's go, or creep, or whatever you're going to use. And you give a gentle push on the bottom, and they get it. And then you reward them, you make a fuss, and then you make them do a little bit further the next time. While it's completely passive and they're not trying to participate in it, you're never going to push them very far because it's not massively helpful. You just want to teach them the idea so that they try to be active in it. Once they start to kind of lift a leg up, you might put your hand under the foot so that they can push off you. Once they're pushing off your hands with your hands under their feet, then you can encourage them to go a bit further. But never make it so hard that they lose interest en route to the toy. Make sure it's a short distance that they creep to and they get the toy and they feel the reward, and you stop there for a moment, you do something else, and you do a little bit later. So it's not essential because a lot of babies don't do it. They go straight onto crawling. But it's a fun thing to do whilst you're doing all the other activities. So at this stage, a lot of people will say to me that they have got positioning devices or tummy time devices. And these might be those inflatable rolls or foam rolls or round pillows that they put their babies on their tummy over. So firstly, I would say with those, they're usually too big. So never use them when you're doing the elbow plank with the baby. Once your baby is comfortably spending time pushing up onto their hands with their elbows straight, you may put a roll in, but look at what it does to your baby. Can you see that that roll is bigger than the length of their arm from armpit to the heel of the hand? Because what that's going to do is throw them backwards, and they're going to slide down, or they're going to have a huge arch of their back, or they're not going to be weight bearing very much through their hands. So most times I don't really like these. I don't find them terribly helpful. I think what is better, if you want to help your baby with a roll, particularly if you think of putting them on all fours, by having a roll under the chest and the belly, it takes some of the weight off the hands and the legs, and they can spend longer there and potentially enjoy it more and do some activities there, the rocking and reaching and things like that. What is probably a better idea is to let them do it over your thigh. And that's because your thigh is usually quite soft. It's also usually smaller than most of these rolls, but most of all, you can feel through your thigh what's happening to your baby. If they are weight bearing too much through you and they're just kind of lying draped across your thigh, or are they doing a bit of active work and pushing up on the hands and weight bearing through the knees? So go and get in your position that you do sitting with them, and you put them over one of your thighs. And then with your other hand, you can help to keep their knees together. And so they are in that nice all fours position without their knees sliding apart. The key when having them on all fours is that their shoulders should ideally be directly above their hands, because then they're weight bearing nicely through their hands. And that's like your high plank that they were doing on the ground. Hands are always directly below the shoulders. Ideally, we'd have the knees directly below the hips as well. However, what we find is that's quite hard initially. So sometimes we let the babies come back and almost sit on their heels. It's called heel sitting. And then they won't be really leaning through their hands, but it might be a start for them from there. And then with a bit of rocking, you may find you take their weight forward. So then they're leaning properly on their hands, and their little knees will be more directly, might not be completely directly below the hips, but will be closer to that position than when they bring their bottom back and sit on their heels. But it's a play between that heel sitting and up to all fours. And you might rock a bit backwards and forwards there on the ground when you are kneeling behind them, or you might be able to even do it over your thigh. Usually when you put a baby over your thigh, you're able to keep them in quite a good alignment. Now remember, we don't want them just flopping and lying. We want them active and lifting up their heads. So put an elevated toy in front of them, either on a cushion, on a box, or on a little chair in front of them, so they have to hold themselves up on straight elbows to see it. The same as when we are playing with them, lying on their tummies, pushing up on straight hands, pivoting, reaching. Most things we want to be slightly elevated. When we go to sitting, we're also going to look at how to help your baby to go from sitting to all fours over your thigh. So that will tie in quite nicely together. So if we do look at sitting, again, you're going to go back to that position that you were in the previous episode. So you sit on the ground, your legs out in front of you, open your legs into a V shape and put your baby right back in between your legs. Now here, we're going to spend time practicing just normal sitting, moving on from where we were. So we're going to put baby's hands in front of their shins, because remember, baby's sitting in what we call ring sit. So their legs are in a bit of a diamond with their feet pointing towards each other. If your baby has their legs straight out in front of them, tickle their foot soles, because they tend to then reflexively bend their knees up. And then you can support their feet towards each other. Maybe even put their hands on their feet so they're more encouraged to play with them and keep them there. Then you're going to put their hands on the ground in front of the shins. You're going to let them lean on their knees, on their thighs. You're going to put the hand, you might have to move your thighs slightly away to make a space. Let them lean on that one hand. We were doing a bit of this last time. We're now going to just do it further away from their body. The same with the reaching. We're going to get them starting to reach across their body for a toy. Now here is where the twist comes in. That is so important. We are going to show them toys to the sides. When they're in sitting, we don't want them constantly reaching forward. So try and limit the amount of time you hand them a toy in front of them, because that also helps this backward forward shift that they do anyway. But also when they're sitting on their bottoms and they start to do that more and more and more, the next step is to bottom shuffle. So let's show them a toy to the side to get them to twist their bodies to the side. So they're twisting the upper body, the bottom stays facing forwards, the upper body twists to the side to get to the toy. And then let them get the toy once they've twisted and bring it back to center and have a play. Then you take it away again, show them the toy to the other side, get that lovely twist to the other side, get the toy, come back to center. And you do lots of repetitions of this, slowly increasing the amount they need to twist. And the progression of that is when they'll twist and they'll lean on your thigh with their elbow, and with the opposite hand reach across their body to get the toy. Remember, we stimulate by touching the hand, making them reach, and then you remove the toy, touch it again, remove the toy further and get them to reach. So they're really twisting their body, leaning on the elbow and reaching across the body to get the toy. The progression on that is for you to then move your thigh away, get them to lean on the hand, twist, reach across the body with the other hand to get the toy, and then come back. So we can do loads and loads of repetitions of that in both directions. Now, what you will start to observe is as you progress further and further twisting and reaching, the opposite leg will start to lift up and fold inwards. Now, this is really important. We want that to happen because every time they lift it, it twists inwards, and that loosens up the hip. Because very often some babies' hips are twisted inwards naturally, but that's different. Most babies, their hips, because of the position in the womb, because of the positions they've been in up until now, the hips are very twisted outwards and they kind of need to loosen up to rotate or twist inwards. So this is really important. That's the start of that inward twist and mobilization of the hip. And what we want is to get to a point where your baby's gone from that diamond shape of their legs in ring sitting to twist the body, lean on the hand, and reach so far with the other hand that the leg folds completely inwards and falls downwards so that it's bent, but the inner leg is in contact with the ground, and the leg on the side they've turned towards, the outer leg, is in contact with the ground. So the legs almost look like two chevrons fitting into each other. Now that is called side sitting, and it's a really important developmental position because here not only are we loosening up the hips, But when they sit in this position, the core has to work so much harder than when they're just sitting on their bottoms in ring sitting. And it's really important, therefore, to be doing it in both directions. So we're going to progress slowly until we're getting them to go to side sitting in both directions. And ideally, we'll be leaning on one hand in side sitting. Then you can help them to put the other hand on the ground in line with the hand that was already there. So they lean on two hands and their legs are folded in that chevron shape of side sitting. And then we do it in the other direction. So you just need to move your thigh away slightly so they can spend time putting their hands down on the outside of one leg, the leg where the outer leg is in contact with the ground. They lean on the two hands there with a lovely twist of the body and the legs folded, their feet pointing away from their bodies behind them. And we do it obviously in both directions, spending as much time as we can there. On other occasions, we're going to put an elevated toy on the outside of your leg, and we're going to get them to twist and reach and put their hands on the outside of your thigh. They might not be able to weight bear from side sitting in that position, but then what we can do is just lift their hips and their lower body ever so slightly, so they'll go from side sitting to being in all fours over your leg. And from there, you can slightly adjust the legs, get the legs in a good position, get the hands in a good position, and then do that where you spend time with them in all fours over your leg, and then bring them back to the middle, get them to twist, reach over your thigh on the other side, bring the other hand over, help their little legs to go into side sitting, and from there up onto all fours, or even just spend time in side sitting. Now, the key thing here is, again, it's your Jenga principle. If that leg is not easily moving into a side sitting position, don't force it. Sometimes all you need to do is bend the knee a bit more so you bring up the heel towards the bottom and you'll find it goes more easily. But if they're resisting, you cannot force it. Ever. Never, ever force it. It must almost naturally go there. And it will not naturally go there unless you have the twist of the body. So practice that first. Get that twist and reach in sitting and watch. As soon as they twist a little bit, that leg's going to start to move. Sometimes you just need to help the position of the foot and you'll see it naturally and easily goes into side sitting. A lot of people confuse this with something we call W sitting, which is when both legs point backwards and the baby almost sits down on their bottom in between their heels or their feet, and their knees are pointed forwards. So their legs are in a W shape. This is different. Here the legs are in the chevron shape, like two V's folding into each other almost. So this is a really, really important position to play in, to spend time in, but it's also the transition position that babies use to get onto all fours. So we show them how to do that. You can sometimes take your thigh away completely and help them to go from side sitting down onto their tummies as well. So now what we're going to start to do is connect all these different positions through movement, and that's called transitions. And the first big one here is going from sitting to side sitting to tummy or all fours over your leg. So a lot of this is about working against gravity, coming up, getting stronger, moving. Of course, rolling is a transition as well. It's moving from the back to the tummy or from the tummy to the back. So we're doing a lot of these movements because that's really what we want your baby now to be doing, is to be moving. And as you are reinforcing communication, your baby is learning cause and effect, because they learn if they grimace, you change what you're doing. If they smile, they get more of it. And then they're also learning to move. So they learn they're now in control of their environment. They can go out and explore and discover. So you want to give them lots of opportunity to be doing these things. So bear in mind as well, when you're now leaving your baby in their safe space and they're playing, you're not going to leave toys right on top of them. You're going to make a little distance. So they have to just, if they're on their back, maybe look, maybe start to roll over. If they're on their tummy, maybe shift, pivot, shuffle a little bit. We are encouraging movement and transition, so out of one position to another position as much as possible. It is very much this stage of development aimed to get them towards crawling. As I said, at the end of this, they don't need to be crawling. Lots of babies aren't crawling at 9 months, but some will be. So if your baby is crawling, fantastic. go with it, encourage it, go straight on to my next episode, but just give them opportunity. Remember, we want to get our babies moving, but then you don't want to not give them opportunity to move. So you want create a safe area that your baby can start exploring, and know that if you're working on this stage, the next stage is your baby crawling around your house. So get your house ready and safe for that little exploratory baby who's going to be on the move shortly. With that, I'm going to do another episode on crawling because it's quite a big topic on its own. But just know some babies won't crawl. So yes, we know that. I think it's a really lovely activity. Crawling is like intensive physiotherapy, I always say to parents. So I always try and get my babies to crawl. If they're at a stage where they're already walking or bottom shuffling, it's very hard to take them back to crawl. So then we have to give them other activities and exercises and things to do instead of crawling. But my audience in this episode, we're pre that stage. So we don't want them to bottom shuffle. We're not going to encourage that. So that's why we're not passing things when they're sitting in front of them. We're always passing things to the side. We're moving them passively towards all fours. And then as they start doing it more and more, we give them less and less assistance to do it. So we're very much hoping we're going to guide them onto a trajectory that will be a crawling trajectory. Some babies, however, no matter what you do, might just not crawl, whatever you do, and they will bottom shuffle. And that's okay. As I said, I'm going to do another episode on that and activities that we do to compensate for having missed out on that. Because crawling is a really good activity to build up strength and stability in the shoulders, in the hips, build up core stability. It develops your fine motor control, crossing your midline, which we call bilateral integration. So it's two sides coming together. There's a lot of really good benefits we get from crawling. So if your baby's at this stage, I would really encourage you to work hard on all of these activities, because once you get them crawling, a lot of the time I say, okay, you don't need to see me now for a while. Just let them crawl. Just give them opportunity. And I give you some ideas and activities how to play with crawling and sometimes make it a bit more tricky, which will be next week's episode. So I would encourage you to really take this to heart and work hard at these things, because it would be really helpful. And then a final note with the developmental things, you'll see we haven't spoken about standing, because a lot of babies nowadays won't be standing yet. And we never force our babies to do something unless they're ready for it, unless they're starting to do it on their own. So the activities I've taken you to are the activities they're not ready yet to be put in a standing position. But I know you will be doing standing things with them anyway, and that's plenty. So when you're cuddling your baby and they're pushing up on their legs and standing, that's a standing activity. What we don't want is to be holding your baby on the ground for ages, forcing them to stand or making them stand, and then they start pushing backwards and using compensatory techniques. So if your baby is crawling and pulling themselves up to stand on furniture, or sitting and pulling themselves up to stand on furniture, that's okay if they are in control of it and they're doing it on their own. We are not going to do it yet. That will come in next week's episode, because these activities are all for this stage of development. And then to finish off, obviously, I'm going to tell you things to look out for. So if your baby is 9 months old and they are now not rolling at all, so if you put them on their back and they don't roll back to their tummy at all, or if they're on their back and they don't really even get to their side, then I would say it doesn't mean that there's something you need to be concerned about necessarily. It might just mean you need a bit more assistance to get them going. And so that's a good time to reach out to your healthcare visitor, physiotherapist, GP who can refer you on. The other thing is, if you're holding them in a sitting position at 9 months, you're supporting them around their lower rib cage and they just are not balancing, keeping their head and body above your hands very nicely, then again, they don't have to have sitting balance to be in this category. What I'm saying is, if you are holding them around the hips, around the lower abdomen, and they still can't balance, or their hands are stuck up here and they can't relax their hand down to the ground or onto their legs in a sitting position, then I would definitely get help. And when you go and pick your baby up, like if you lift them up out of bed when they're lying down, if you still find that you're worrying about their head dropping back, or you're not confident that you can pick your baby up around their body and they can hold their head in line with their body, I would also get help then. And of course, like I always say, if your baby is really stiff and rigid when you're trying to bend their legs to change their nappy, or when you try and pick them up, their arms feel really stiff, or the complete opposite of that, they're really loose and floppy in your hands, that's always a good idea to see if there's any way you can help them there. I always talk about flattening across the back of the head, or flattening on one side of the head, or the head turning preference where they're always looking to one side, or you have any head shape concerns like I've just described, then you either reach out to me, you do the resources that I have to help you with those things. But the other thing that now becomes relevant, because your baby is now more upright, what we see when babies have a head turning preference, they can also have something called a head tilt. So it's not where the head is turned to one direction all the time. It's when you hold them upright. So when they're doing the sitting position, if they tip one ear towards the same shoulder. So that's the tilt. Now that's usually, as I say, it goes hand in hand with the head turning preference. And it's really important that when you are starting to do these sitting activities with your baby, at the start of this category, you start to look for that and notice, is there a pattern? Do they always tip the same ear towards the same shoulder? Because if that is the case, your baby is then going to develop an idea that that is horizontal. Then it's very tricky. Once we've corrected the neck muscle imbalance, it's very tricky then to teach them this is horizontal. They must now hold their head like this. So it's important to look for that as soon as you are at the start of this category where you're working on more upright sitting activities, and either to do the head turning preference course that I've got, or reach out to me, or reach out to a physiotherapist, GP, health visitor, because that's something that can be corrected relatively easily, but we just need to make sure it's done before the bad habit sets in. So that's again a lot of information. Pick a few activities only if you want to. I would say really work hard at sitting, to twist, to go onto all fours over your leg if possible, so that your baby starts to consolidate the idea of crawling, and we go from there. That would be my absolute favorite if you can't take anything else from this. But please do reach out if you feel like you want some more support with these activities. I, as you can hear, probably am very passionate. I love this stuff, and I think it's really, really helpful for our babies to get them developing nice and smoothly. So with that, it's time for me to say goodbye and to wish you all the very best and all the best for your baby.